do this. Let me switch the count. Yep.
We're live.
Cool.
All right, nobody say nothing. I'm going to count you in. I need that quiet.
Sorry. All right, welcome back. Episode 28 of Few Good Physios. We're super excited. Today we have the co-founders of Match Fit Performance, Erwin, Seguia, and Rena, Eleazar. And we're super excited. We've been trying to set this up for a little while, and we finally got them in. And welcome.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
guys. Thank you guys for coming over.
Thanks for
Yeah.
having us.
Thanks for having us.
So we like to start off with a little kind of background. Like one of the things that we usually say is like, who are you? What are you doing here? Kind of thing. And let's start with basically where you guys went to PT school.
So we both graduated from NYU. I graduated in 2014, Erwin in 2013.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
And yeah, we met in school, had some of the same goals, and everything went from there. Also a very funny story how we ended up where we are now.
Oh, I'd love to hear this.
Let's hear it.
Yeah.
We're all
This is a
about
good,
funny
this is a good
stories.
start.
Oh boy, you can start.
Are we talking about the pitching story or, I mean,
No, well,
Oh, how we
I
met?
was talking about how we met.
how we actually
yeah.
met? So we actually met as a result of one of my best friends in the program. So as a second year, they set up a really good culture at NYU where all the incoming first years get paired up with a second year just to introduce students to the culture, assign them with somebody that has very similar interests, and so the transition into grad school is much easier.
Mm.
And so because of being in physical therapy school, the profession is predominantly women, right? And so for my class, in a class of about 30, 33, 35, there was 2 females to every male.
Mm-hmm.
And so when my best friend and my desk buddy, was assigning partners, out of all of the guys, I was the only one that was assigned to a woman as a buddy. And so I never heard the end of it. My buddy never heard the end of it. And we got assigned together because we had shared a ton of very similar interests. We danced in college. I competed in ballroom and choreographed hip hop. Rena competed in hip hop and did some choreography as well.
Wow.
So like that was, we had a lot of similar interests, and that's the rest is history.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
That's right. I remember I saw a couple of videos, either you posted on Instagram of some of the old hip hop videos.
Oh yeah.
And then you posted something too when
Yeah.
you
I
danced
did.
too. I was like, God, they were the dancers, and that was awesome.
Yeah.
They were really good at it too.
It's past life, sort of, but
Yeah.
I miss
Sort
it
of.
a little bit.
Yeah, we find ourselves reminiscing a lot, actually. And we, during study breaks, we would get sucked into the YouTube hole of our favorite choreographers and the videos that they would post. And we actually did that again recently. We just stayed up late and just ran through all the videos that we used to watch and realized that that was 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
Wow.
And it kind of made us miss it and pledged to go back to it at some point. But
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Little hip hop ballroom combo. Kind
Yeah.
Very
Just a
cool.
good time.
we're
And
a
that was
hit
a-
at weddings.
That's right. You can still whip it out and do it at dance parties.
Mhm.
And prior to, I guess, PT school, why PT? For either you guys.
So, interesting story. I actually started in undergrad in business school. I thought I wanted to be a CPA on Wall Street.
Wow.
And I was really good at accounting. I took basic accounting in high school. And I got to my first Foundations of Business class. It was a pretty big lecture. And my professor said, "Who knows what happened in the Fed today?" And I look around the room. All these kids are raising their hands. They want to say the answer. And I kind of sat there and said, I don't really care what happened in the Fed today. And that was the first day of class.
Oh my God.
So I did go through the whole quarter. We did a lot of business presentations. I learned how to analyze a financial statement. It was a lot of prep work, which actually ended up helping us out a bit
Yes.
in the beginnings
sure.
of the
Huge.
beginnings of starting MatchFit for
Massive.
sure.
Yeah.
But when I left the business program, I knew I was better at science, didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to go to med school, and I didn't want to be an engineer, and I didn't want to do what most of my Filipino friends were doing, which was nursing. So I was always an athlete. I was a competitive swimmer for a very long time. I did a short stint for Drexel at a D1 level. So
Wow.
I looked into just a general health science program, and then Drexel is also a co-op school. So when we were interviewing for co-ops, I was interested in more of and found a really great place in Philadelphia. It's called Good Shepherd Penn Partners. They're primarily affiliated with University of Pennsylvania Hospital, and met an amazing team of PTs there from all different backgrounds. So neuro, pelvic health, ortho, of course, people who did the workman's comp evaluations. And so I got to see a lot of different things, certified hand therapists as well. So it was a good variety of things that I got exposed to, and definitely set me in the course of wanting to go to PT school.
Definitely.
Cool.
Sounds like an inspiring group, right?
Yeah, yeah. I keep in touch with a lot of them today through Facebook, and it was really cool when I was applying to school, and then even when I was graduating, and still being able to keep in touch with them and remembering how I was when I was just starting out and still figuring out my way. And it's been really awesome just to see the growth from there.
Very cool.
That's
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I was from the other end, so I didn't spend a lot of time in numbers. I was actually a biochemistry major in undergrad. So I was at Binghamton University. I had a big athletic background playing soccer my whole life, and I ended up playing club at Binghamton. And I was a pre-med biochemistry major. I had these like big aspiring dreams to go to medical school, and my junior year, shadowing a cardiologist. I was living where my parents were living, and they still live now up in Westchester County, just north of the city. I was shadowing a cardiologist who is a cardiac cath. He worked in the cardiac cath lab, and we spent a whole summer just hanging out. I watched him do a lot of minimally invasive procedures, placing stents, clearing up blockages in the coronary arteries. I did a lot of data aggregation and like crunched a bunch of numbers for him. And at the end of the summer, we sat down. He's like, "So, are you ready to go to med school next year or apply?" And I looked at him. I was like, "I'm not really sure." And he was like, he's like, "Yeah, it's a lot of work." He's like, "If you are not really 100% into it," he's like, I wouldn't recommend it. And I don't know what possessed me to ask the question, but I looked at him and I asked him, if you could do it again, would you do it again?
That's a great
And
question.
he looked at me and he was like, to be honest, no.
Wow.
And that I sat and it like set off these like fireworks in my brain, and I was like, oh shoot. So I went home and I was like, I'm not gonna go to med school. Like this, it's not worth it for me. And at the time, what was it, like 20-year-old me was like, oh yeah, I wanna have a family. In 10 years I wanna have a family. I wanna have a full job. And if I was gonna go into medical school, it's like 4 years undergraduate, 4 years postgrad, residency, and then I either wanted to go into cardiology or neurology, which is like extra time, right?
Oh, yeah.
So like by the time I get out of medical school and out of fellowship and residency and all that stuff, I'm maybe 35, and so it didn't align with like what I thought I wanted to do, and it set off this like early quarter life crisis where I was like, what do I do? I was like, I love athletics. I love working with athletes. I like having these personal exchanges and building relationships with clients and athletes. So I can't do that as a cardiac cath doctor.
No,
Right.
definitely not.
So I ended up making my way into this. You shadowed the athletic trainers at Binghamton University. It was like a mini residency, like internship kind of thing. So I learned how to tape ankles. I slung ice bags for a while, and I was like, oh, I want to go into AT. And interestingly enough, the head AT, I think he's still at Binghamton, Noel Zay, he looks at me and he's like, you honestly don't want to go into AT. I was like, why?
Oh, man.
I was like, why?
A
I was
lot
like,
of
why?
people telling you what you don't
I
want to
know.
do.
I was like, why are people crushing my dreams? And he's like, to be fair, you know, it's super tough. Like, I want to have a family, but I'm always on the road with the teams that I'm with. And to be fair, it's not super different from what we're doing right now, but
Yeah.
it's a little different. But you know, it's hard to have a personal life when you're on the road with your teams a lot, and you basically are on call for the teams that you work with. So I was like, oh shoot, and he goes, maybe you should look into PT. So that following summer, like in junior year, or like into my senior year, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to PT school. I did my research. I looked up all the schools that I could potentially go to, figured out how to apply, what they needed, and did all my prereqs. I took a gap year after I graduated from Binghamton, and luckily enough, got into PT school. I applied to like 9, and I got into one. I got into one. I got waitlisted at the other.
Wow.
And NYU was the only school that was like, we want you here. And I was like, great, let's go. I'm going to take on
That's
six
awesome.
figs of death. Let's go.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's awesome! It's so funny. I was before we started, I was asking if they had listened to the Steve Horney one,
Right.
and very similar work. Because I don't know. Well, if you didn't listen to it, he was kind of being mentored by an athletic trainer that worked at his school, and he was talking to him. He's like, I want to be just like you. I want to be able to go to athletic training school. And the guy was like, you don't want to do this. And he kind of had the same reasons. He was like, you know, you have more options with PT, and I think you're more suited for PT and things like that. It was very interesting, but no, it's a great story.
Yeah, it's interesting. Both of you have that flashbulb moment. I know you probably have it. I know I had it. But you just remember that shift when someone said, have you ever considered a career in physical therapy? Or, you know, it's a shift. It's pretty cool that we all remember crystal clear
That
shift.
moment.
I don't know if they
Yeah.
were really trying to defend their positions as ATs too, because it's a really competitive market, right? There's
Sure.
only
Oh,
so
that's
many
true.
teams and schools and places that you can work for.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, it's fine. I ended up in the place that I wanted to be anyways, which was great. But I like, in my head, I'm like, I wonder if they did that on purpose.
Just a bit to
little-
decrease the competition.
So both of you guys got into right after school. Did you guys work in any other practices? What was your experience right after school as a new grad, I guess?
So I started in one of the bigger, I guess, chains.
Yep.
Here,
Yeah,
here
you
in
can
the here in the city. I was there for about a year and a half, and I just felt like I wasn't giving the patients the attention that I thought they needed.
Right.
And it got to the point where it was all about the numbers. And I remember there was a chart in my supervisor's office, and when I would come in and say, listen, I feel like I don't have the support that I need on the floor, because there would be some of my coworkers would be taking in such a high volume that the aides would be monopolized.
Yes.
So I would try to position myself in such a way that I could keep an eye on the people who are on the floor, but also have my hands on somebody on the table and be, shouting out directions, whatever, form changes. I'm sure you both know how that goes. But at a certain point, I was just like, I really can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And it's going, we may get into this later, we may not, but we just did a talk yesterday at Columbia's DPT program about branding and marketing, and how setting up a really solid brand and really defining your values and what you believe in will steer you in your course, wherever that may be. So at that point in time, what they were asking me to do was just really against my values and what I went into the profession for. So I left, went to a smaller out-of-network clinic, and decided to do it part-time while we were starting to gain more momentum with MatchFit. And I guess I was there also about a year and a half. And then as of January last year, what year are we in? 2019.
Yeah.
So January of 2018 was when I was full-time MatchFit, no part-time gigs or anything.
Wow.
So yeah, it's
Congrats.
been quite a ride.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
I know it. It's actually a motivating force to see what's out there. I know
Yeah.
you're being politically correct, and that's cool. But it is like the chain. It kind of goes against everything I think anybody got into PT for. I shouldn't say anybody, but
No, I mean, I think it was interesting. I had an experience this week at another clinic, and a patient said something really interesting to me that I thought I would bring up here. There was me and 2 other PTs on, and on average,
you.
there's
Thank
like,
you.
bless you, there's about 2 patients per hour for follow-ups at this location. And this person was looking around, and she's not my normal patient. She would always be seen by another therapist. And it wasn't busy for the space, but everybody had full schedules, but there was only 3 total PTs on. And she looked around, she's like, this place needs to be busier. And she goes, you should just line up people. And she was being dead serious. And I was like, I'm not sure what you mean. She's like, I've been to other places where they'll have like 8 people on a table for 1 person. I'm like, I didn't want to go into it with her because it was like, we had 15 minutes left of the appointment. It would have been taken away from her treatment, and I tried to distract, but that was the mindset. It was like that was normal for her, and that was normal for PT. And I feel like on our end, we're always trying to say like, all right, what can we give to you to help you with your injury and whatever you're recovering from? And that is not the way to do it. I mean, the way to do it is to have, as we know, education, one-on-one, being able to talk to the person, being able to watch them move, things like that, assess. And I think it's a strange norm now that I think a lot of patients have, and unfortunately some PTs have. But I think, why we're really wanted to have you guys on and talk about MatchFit is because MatchFit in itself is kind of trying to broaden that perspective, right?
smash that perspective.
Yeah.
Actually, just
Yeah.
crush it completely. That's not
Just get rid of
flip
it.
the table because that someone's experience with PT, they might have their entry point. They might think that that's a normal thing that their PT is screaming over the table, bend your knees, bring your hips back, whatever.
Remote coaching.
Yes,
Yeah.
remote
Yeah.
coaching.
Basically.
And then the person on the table who you're working on your hand. Yeah, it's the system needs to get flipped, as you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What really kind of drove me, I would say, before I finally jumped off and left that job, but what drove me closest to the edge was when I had a client on the table and she noticed that I was managing I think I had 4 people in the office at one time at that
It's tough.
particular moment in time. And very sweet woman. She did everything that I asked her to do. I could tell at times that she would get frustrated because I couldn't spend more time with her.
Mm-hmm.
But she actually left a Yelp review, did not say anything about me specifically, so didn't say my name, but commented on the environment and
Gotcha.
how if I remember correctly, her specific words were the way that they have the environment set up makes the therapist really inefficient at their jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And then she commented on how much she was getting billed for her sessions.
Oh, yeah, that's the other
Of
thing.
course. Yeah.
And so of course my boss pulled me aside and said, what happened with this patient? What could you have done differently? And I said, I did everything in my power
Mm-hmm.
to try to give her what she needed.
Yeah.
And of course it was my fault, quote unquote.
Of course.
And so that was probably what pushed me the most over to looking at other options.
Mm-hmm.
And that sticks with me. That moment sticks with me a lot when we get to a point where we're thinking, okay, this is really hard. Like, why are we doing this? Like, coming back to our why. That's one of the moments that sticks out in my mind.
Yeah.
Why?
Absolutely. So well, I was gonna ask, when was the kind of the inception of MatchFit? Was it like, was it right out of school, or were you guys kind of planning that, or was it something that after going through these experiences, you're like, we should kind of plan out some other option here?
Like tomorrow.
Let's do it now.
So I graduated a year before Rena in 2013. I knew after I finished my second affiliation at NYU, the second affiliation is usually orthopedic, and I had this weird feeling coming into school. I was like, I know I want to be in orthopedics. I finished my second rotation. I was like, I know I want to be in orthopedics. I know I want to be either involved in somebody's practice as like an administrator to help guide that process.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wherever it goes. Or I either want to be running the show. And, Rena and I were talking in my third year, because in our third year there's a business plan class where you put together a business plan, you do a lot of the market research and appraising and figuring out what your niche is. And Rena and I sat down, we were like, okay, what can we do to just start? Because obviously we're not going to be able to start an empire in one day. And 2013, when I graduated, it was when CrossFit was like on its way to its peak. Kelly Starrett was crushing it out in San Francisco on the West Coast, and when we had done our market research, there were no physical therapists that were positioned in any CrossFit boxes in New York City, out of anywhere from 10 to 15 boxes at the time. And so our goal was like, okay, well, like let's step into the niche. I just need to pass my boards, and let's start figuring out how this goes. So we went on Google, found every single CrossFit box in Manhattan and in Queens, because I was living in Astoria. You were in Hoboken still, right? Or no, Harlem?
Harlem.
So we were like, okay, well, where do we go? And I remember walking into my first CrossFit box on the Upper East Side. I believe it was CrossFit Metropolis. And I was like, bright-eyed, fresh new grad, like, hey, do you guys need a physical therapist on staff? And so sorry for the Rick and Morty voice.
Love the reference.
Oh, jeez. So like walk in, I'm like, hey, you need a physical therapist on staff. And one of the coaches looked at me and was like, wait, are we allowed to curse on here?
Yeah, please.
The coach looked at me and was just like, get the fuck out of here. I was like, okay, bye. So I walked out, and I remember texting Rena afterwards, and I was like, wow, that sucked. That was terrible. And so it ended up being, and both of us had zero experience in any sort of business or marketing or branding, and it turned into a crash course in like figuring out how to pitch and like how to offer our services. And, one of the biggest themes that came up for us was that nobody knows what we do in the first place. So literally after going through 10 or 12 boxes in New York City, I remember walking into the doors of CrossFit Concrete Jungle when they used to be on 94th and 3rd or something like that. And I was like, hey, is the owner around? And one of the guys was like, yeah, he's not in till later. So I was like, all right, great. I'll just swing in at the end of my shift. So I came in before the gym closed, walked up to the owner. His name is Sean Wright. And I was like, hey, we learned how to, what's that? Do you know?
No, I know Sean. I know Sean.
Oh, shit,
awesome.
that's so funny.
Good shit.
Small world.
So I came in, and it was like, I knew exactly what to expect. Like the pitch it wasn't perfected, but I didn't come in like, oh, I'm a physical therapist. I was like, hey, can I talk to you for a minute about, any injuries that your athletes are dealing with? What's your injury rates? What's the average time that your athletes take when they're, when they're injured? And he's like, oh, well, we get a lot of shoulder injuries, blah, blah, blah. Shoulder injuries, mostly lower back. I was like, okay, well, what if I told you I could help with that? And he was like, okay, I'm interested. And I was like, oh, I'm a physical therapist. I just finished school, but I've done a lot of stuff in orthopedics already. And he was like, oh yeah, I've had really good experience with physical therapists. He's like, well, come hang out.
Nice.
And so
he's a cool dude, man.
Sean
is he's a character. I love him. Sean, if you're hearing.
War Eagle.
Puff Daddy. We have there's a whole story behind Puff Daddy. I'll explain.
Oh man, yes. So, well, even better. So we came around, and we found that there was a CrossFit gym just down the street from us in Astoria. And so CrossFit Dynamics at the time was also in their peak too, sending teams to the games and stuff, and a couple of athletes. And we had walked in, and the owners were like, yeah, we love physical therapists, giving a similar pitch. And so it took 10 tries of just fucking up over and over and over. And I was like, God, this is the worst, but I don't see myself doing anything else.
Right.
And so the lessons between and themes oh, well, nobody knows what we do. I just need to figure this out. Even if I screw up, or even if it's, not the right fit or the right timing, which is what now it's everybody and their mother has a CrossFit or has a PT in their gym.
Yes.
Yep.
And so Rena and I are definitely ahead of the trend.
Yeah.
So But regardless, like the lessons that we picked up there, and how we turn those into the visions for what we want for our practice, and exactly why you brought us on today is we think that PT needs to take an extra step, and there's almost like an evolution, and we can get more into that too. But the way that we see it is, I think there's just a box, and there's a pigeonhole that most people put PTs in, and we actually don't refer to ourselves as physios anymore because there's the insurance issue, and again, like when people put you into that insurance box, it almost like prices you out of giving you using the out-of-pocket / cash option.
Yes.
So Shantae, the movement maestro, talks about like lowest bidder stuff through insurance. And it's an amazing post. She just loves to blow the lid off stuff. But I was talking with my business coach yesterday, and she dropped this bomb, and I had to ask her to repeat it like 3 times, and it didn't hit. And she goes, so basically, we had talked about insurance, why we don't accept insurance in match fit performance, and I didn't get to tell you this.
You told me a little bit.
Oh yeah. She looked at me and she goes, well, so what it sounds like is if you have to take insurance and you have to be in network, you're basically just depending on insurance companies to keep you open.
Oh.
And I was like, wait a second.
Say that again.
And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
She like hit it nail on the head, right? So if you took the insurance companies away, and a lot of these companies and a lot of these practices kept their doors open, people would be like, oh, I have to you're billing my insurance company this, and now you're going to bill me this, and I'm getting this amount of service?
Right.
Like, this is trash. Hot basura. So it's like, and what's so frustrating and so crazy is that there's an infographic. I think you posted it, or I've seen it around. Insurance premiums have increased like almost 3 times in the past like 12 to 15
Big
years.
ones, yeah.
So you're paying. What are you paying 3 times more for the same crap service?
Less, probably.
Less.
Because there's more of those stupid limitations that they're for a PT at least in terms of in-network billing, and so there's less and less for us to be able to do because we can't even get reimbursed for it, and or the person can't even come in because of authorization, all that shit. So and then things keep going up. So it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense.
But a whole career, that was a great line though, because I mean, I always say this, that a lot of PTs should know that their careers are being controlled by other entities, whether it's an insurance company, hospital organizations, which are very similar. But that's crazy. So they go, you basically work for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your control, and now that probably I would say the only best thing that Trump has done, making hospitals disclose all of their fees. I was I saw this link to this random hospital in like Florida. Yeah, Ohio was one, Florida. I think it was like somewhere, not like maybe Ocala. I don't know, like middle of nowhere, Florida. Sorry if you live in Ocala. But they were charging like $600 to $750 for an inpatient eval.
What?
So like get up, turn on.
Can you get up? Can you walk up?
That's like 10 minutes.
It's like 10 minutes. You spend you spend more than 10 minutes, and then
just
talk about
talk about it.
documentation with all the crap documentation systems. So like there's stuff that needs to change, and again, like when it comes back to insurance and lowest bidder, and it's something that almost like triggers me when people are like, oh, do you take insurance? And I'm like,
no.
No.
And here's why. Read this.
Yeah. I mean, and having that discussion with these potential clients where I'm like, listen, if you want to pay $20 for a session, like you're going to get $20 worth of treatment.
Yeah.
Not even. And if you even pay attention to your explanation of benefits, your EOBs, you're going to find out that they're billing a lot more than what you're paying.
Right.
And one of my big light bulb moments, on that vein, one of my jobs, I won't say which job, I had a client who was coming in end plan of care hamstring strain. She was already like on her way, feeling better, super great. All we were doing was like we were loading her hamstring. All of it was just like getting her ready to return to running. And we had maybe had 5 or 6 sessions. I was only telling her to come in like once, maybe twice a week. And so this was a high volume clinic here in the city. And she emailed me one day, and it was this furious email. And I didn't glean anything from the subject, and I read the thing, and she's like, "Why am I getting billed for manual therapy?" And I was like, "Oh, so this is also, so this was 2000 like end 2013, beginning 2014. Everybody's supposed to be making that transition into EMR. We were still on paper.
Oh, wow.
So I was writing all of my notes and being super diligent. I was like, okay, well, 97110, 97112, 2 units of each.
Right.
So not manual, sorry. Therapeutic exercise, neuro-re-ed. And she's like, well, I got billed for manual therapy. I was like, I'm sorry. I write the notes, but I don't bill. So unfortunately, like, let me connect you with our office manager. She can definitely answer your questions. Like, I'm really sorry because that's not what I wrote on my notes. So she goes to she had to talk to the office manager, and I ended up getting in trouble because they had to refund the woman money because, they misbilled her.
Right.
What's it called? They misbilled her insurance.
Right.
And so
I don't think they misbilled, but
No,
that was the
Right,
explanation to
right.
me.
Gotcha,
And like,
gotcha.
the onus falls on me because I didn't do my documentation right, and
Correct.
I know exactly what I
Of
wrote on
course.
those
Right.
notes. So it's like that was like one of the big turning points, and it's one of our core values with our practice is to make sure that everything is like we treat with integrity and we treat with transparency. So you're gonna get what you pay for. Like if you want to go to a dealership and you walk into like an Audi dealership in Midtown, you're like, hey, I want that S4. I'll pay you $30,000 for it. The guy's gonna laugh you out. The dealers are gonna laugh you out of
Right,
the
of
office,
course.
of the dealership. So why, and the way that we try to pitch ourselves and position ourselves in healthcare and in fitness is, if you want to pay for what you're getting, then you're gonna get it. Otherwise, yeah, sure, you might be able to pay $20 per session and maybe get you from A to B, and then maybe end up back at square A, point A, like shortly after. So.
I think it's even riskier than that though. Like if they go to the quote less expensive option and they're going in network, they could be seeing someone who is giving them misinformation and or just completely lethargic and or just very burned out, and then they'll continue on some other road where it may lead them to surgery or lead them to injections, lead them to medication, whatever it is, and then they're all going down a brand new road of bad disability and injury. So I think that's like one of our main things is if you're getting to someone who's going to sit down with you and kind of bring forth everything that is available, like evidence, experience, athleticism, anything like that, like at least in orthopedics, musculoskeletal care, then the likelihood of that happening in terms of leading them in the wrong direction is going to be way less. And yeah, it's going to cost. I mean, I when I went through my neck injury, it cost me a pretty penny, but I only saw the guy 3 times, and I'm 100% better.
What's
and
a pretty penny though?
I shouldn't say pretty penny. You want to go over the prices that they were doing? So they gave me a deal because they were. This was a former professor of mine. They usually charge about $580 per. I think that was for the eval, and I think it was $350 for the follow-ups. So they gave me a going rate, I think, of $250 for each.
You got a deal.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess I say that because like the mindset of it, but you're right.
Sure.
It's not. It wasn't. So
Yeah.
250 times 3. 750 if my math is correct. I'm terrible at numbers.
Yes, 750.
So under $1,000, I got the adequate information, and I got the appropriate treatment, and I got a plan, an action plan for myself to do to get me to the 100% that I wanted. Now I'm back to competitive jiu-jitsu, and I'm definitely not in any more pain. I don't have any more weakness. And I could. My primary doctor wanted me to see a neurologist right away. They're like, you're probably gonna have surgery, and I was like, not really.
No.
I don't need surgery, but yeah. So I think that's like the main thing is.
Yeah, it's a perception thing, like you just said, that you're trying to break, and I think it's up to us right now, like this podcast itself, really trying to change the perception of, physical therapy isn't always in your best interest to think about the lowest bidder. It's your body. You have one of them. I mean, it's the biggest investment you can make in your life. So yeah, I think when you break it down to that, I think you shared a post with me. It might have been your post about you sending a video saying to all new grads, just do the math.
Yeah.
Of your salary.
That's right. That was you.
That was
me.
That was great. The day one, I had a hard time because I was training before I was a therapist, and I tell people this that knew me. I'm like, I took a pay cut to become a physical therapist initially, and I always had in the back of my mind like, this is crazy, and I knew what they were charging. Quickly, I think within 6 months, I started asking people from billing, and I started doing the numbers, and I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't really equate. But this is something for all of our listeners and viewers. I'll pass it back on to you, the simple math equation of salary versus hours worked.
Oh my gosh. I mean, all you have to do is, as a new grad, you're getting paid for technically 40 hours a week, so 80 hours, right, per paycheck. And if you take whatever you're making, so I don't know, anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000, and you divide that by 80, it's clearly your hourly rate.
Right. So not including taxes.
And that's not including.
That's not including taxes. That's not including documentation time.
Oh,
that's
documentation.
Yeah.
It's not 80. It's probably like 95.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Absolutely.
And so, like, now, when you look at that number and you sit there and you're like, okay, this is, especially when we come into the profession, or the reason we even go into school is to help people. We want to do the right thing. We want to be, we want to serve with integrity. We want to serve with transparency. We want to help. We want to see people grow and succeed. Unless you are not in that boat, and then I don't know how you made it into PT school. To be honest.
Get into another career, right?
Yeah,
I always say that.
Go swim with the sharks in Wall Street, like, honestly.
Right.
But not that there's anything wrong with finance, but it comes down to, like, valuing ourselves. And, like, sure, it's, some people might disagree, especially with millennials. Like, everybody's so focused on monetary value, and but our time is super valuable, right? And there's what's that stat from, like, new grad PT or something, like the average lifespan of a physical therapist is like less than like an NFL linebacker. It's like 4 to 5 years or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if I might be misquoting it, but like it's wild. And the fact that all of our colleagues at some point have experienced some sort of burnout within the first 2 to 3 years of practicing is a really telltale sign. So, there has to be so much more that needs to change, like, cultural-wise. Please interrupt me. I know you want to say it.
Yeah.
I know you want to jump in.
Not yet.
Okay. There's so many things that need to change culture-wise. And, like, I had friends that went into med school, like best friends from high school, that were like, oh yeah, I'm going to med school. I was like, great, I'll be with you, but I'm going to be out a little bit earlier and practicing. Mm-hmm. And one of my buddies who's like PGY 2, PGY 3 was like, man, I'm depressed. He's like, they work with me like a dog. I was like, what are you getting paid? He was at University of Maryland, and he was getting paid like $50,000 a year to work like 12-something hour shifts, like 3 to 4.
This is a doctor, right?
Yeah, he's a doctor.
Wow.
He's moving into GP, I think. Rich Chang, what up? If you're watching. Yeah, but he was like, I'm depressed. He's like, I hate this, and I was like, well, what's your plan? He's like, well, I'm already a PGY 3. Like, I might as well just finish it. Right. And I was like, that's crazy. I felt bad for a moment, but also, like, there's so much of this onus and this, like, debt, not even just financial, but like emotional, physical debt that we get placed on our shoulders to go and help people. Like, going to a private school for secondary education is not cheap. And we come out to go and serve people, and, like, one of my biggest pet peeves, and it fucking pisses me off, is like when practitioners go out to start their own business, and a lot of these bigger practices are just so focused on bottom dollar that, like, I get it. You have to pay for your, a big, beautiful space, especially here in New York City. Like, real estate is not cheap, right?
Mhm.
You have to pay for that. You have to pay for the people that staff the front desk. You have to pay your practitioners. But the only people that are really laughing at the end of the day, or really like enjoying it at the end of the day, are the people at the top of that food chain.
Yes.
So like, again, and like when you check your paycheck and when you check your colleagues' paychecks, and even talking with potential people that were earmarked for, and you can definitely speak to this too, that were earmarked for supervisor / like admin, higher positions, whatever, in the company. They were expected to take on admin duties and see more patients.
Mhm.
So what is that? Like, you don't get valued at all.
It's an industry norm. It sounds like an industry
it is,
norm.
It is for sure. I have 3 older brothers, so the youngest of the 3 is a physical therapist in New Jersey.
Mm.
He is a clinical director for, oh my gosh, why am I blanking? Kessler.
Mm.
So one of the outpatient clinics.
Mhm.
And he actually, when he was considering interviewing for the role, we were out to dinner or lunch or something. We were celebrating something. And Erwin and I had already started working with MatchFit, deciding how we were going to go about it, what we were charging our clients, and figuring out next steps, coming up with our 5-year, 10-year plan. And my brother comes in and says, oh, yeah, I'm going to interview to be clinical director for the location that I work at. I said, oh, that's great. How much are you asking? And his number was so low that both of us had to be like, dude, you better be asking for 6 figures if that's what they're expecting you to do.
At Kessler, yeah.
And
it's a huge place.
and so he, I assume, I didn't ask exactly what he was offered after that, but I assume he negotiated good benefits and things like that. I mean, he's able to get married this year, so I guess he's doing okay.
But he's working 40 hours.
But
Or
he
maybe,
works way more than 40 hours.
Yeah.
Like every time I get to go visit home, and actually on top of that, he's doing part-time in a hospital. So he's been doing that since he graduated.
Hustle, yeah. That's
And
amazing.
so
Yeah. Good dude.
every time I talk to him, he's dead tired. Every time I speak to my mom, she says, I don't even talk to your brother anymore because he gets home and he goes straight to bed and I don't even get to talk to him.
Yeah.
So it's definitely an industry norm, I would say.
Which sucks. Like, why is that the industry norm?
That's
It shouldn't be.
There's basically
Definitely should not.
unhealthy leaders, right?
Right.
You got a clinical director. He has to have some level of experience, some level of technical knowledge, some passion to what he's doing. And he's burning himself. He's not healthy, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, no offense to your brother, but
No.
you know what I mean.
No.
No, it's
We
We
it's
tell
true.
him that too.
We tell him all the time,
Mhm.
like he needs to
Healthcare
take
professional.
more breaks. He needs to, self-care, and we've had to do a lot of our own, a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Self-development.
Self-care, self-development, but also like taking a really deep look into yourself and looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, is this really what you want to be doing for the rest of your life? And so we've had a lot of those discussions with ourselves.
Big one. That's
Huge.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting to the point now where we're like, it's stressful, but
Yeah.
I love to do what
Those-
I'm doing.
Those
Mhm.
conversations, they initially sucked. And, a lot of it was initial fear. It's for most people, it's fear, right?
Yeah.
When you sit down, you're like, oh, this is great. And for me, like, I got out of school, like, landed my first job, and I was getting, so I think entry-level pay in 2013 was like 65 or something like that. I was making 70 out of school, and I was like, yeah, I'm rolling in the dough. Like, this is my first paycheck, like, balling out. Yeah, I was like, yeah, right? And then like, balling out, it's great. And then, 6 months in, I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And I had to like sit and kind of like have this like very awkward self-appraisal, and I'm like, well, okay, this is what I'm making per hour. And I was like, first there was like what's like the 7 steps. You're like angry. I was like fucking pissed off, and then I was like, all right, well, like what was it? Like
Start
indifference,
rationalizing,
and then
I'm the new grad.
rationalizing. Yeah,
I'm the new
like,
grad.
grad, like this is like I deal with this. And then afterwards, I I ended up getting fired from that job. Actually, that's a long story. That's a long story. It could potentially be a good one. But it ended up being a blessing because I was like, it ended up putting me in, along this path where I ended up at BFit Physical Therapy. It's run by 2 fellow NYU alum. They're based out of Times Square. Wonderful one-on-one 45-minute treats, and they basically are still like a startup as well, where the therapist wears all of the hats. And so it was one of my goals to, start putting in, Rena's goals too, is to start putting together the tool set and the skill set to eventually jump off and do our own thing. So I learned how to call for benefits and patiently is subjective. Patiently wait to get benefits on the phone.
Nice word to say.
And,
but
yell into the phone and like really curse off the automated system, and fight with people from India and the Philippines.
Yes.
And then
Spot on.
and then figure out wear the admin hat. Like, all right, end up having to sell people on coming in for the eval. And so like a lot of that process that we had learned from Brian and Erica, who were so awesome and they were super helpful. They led us down that path. So but going back to those initial conversations with me and you, it was just like, what do I want to be struggling? Do I expect to see like this amount of clients and like do all of the manual therapy in 10 years? Like I was like, oh, my hands are sore. Like I'm tired. I'm tired every day. I'm burned out. I am frustrated with the clientele that I'm seeing. And there's so much, again, it comes down to the culture, just in general, of the way that we value ourselves and the way that we value our clients. Because when it comes down to it, if we're not valuing the client, and we're not doing everything we can to get the client better and send them off with tools to manage on their own. Because what we say to our clients is, my job is to make you not need me as a physio, but to need me as a sports performance coach, as a strength and conditioning coach, or as a personal trainer, I guess, if you want to say that. Because again, like when we make people dependent on us, and we've talked about those narratives. I know Jordan was on talking about like BPS stuff with y'all. Like it's irresponsible, and the way that a lot of the medical industry is set up right now is just so focused on like, oh well, when you run, your knee drops in like this, and if you keep running like that, and all of the fear-based stuff is it sucks. I've done it, and
we all done it. We all that's all we
all did
knew.
it. Yeah.
So here, I would 2 questions. One, when you guys did the talk at the Columbia DPT program, it was about branding and also about business development. Did you guys dive into any of this in terms of like, do you want to figure out what you want to do? And then in terms of reality of like, especially, we're only really speaking about musculoskeletal care, orthopedics. Like I think it's slightly different for neuro care and things like that. But did you guys do that? Did you guys dive into it a little bit with the students?
Yeah, we did a little bit. So one of the 3, I guess, sections, pillars, I don't really know what to call them, when we talk about branding is looking at your vision. So Erwin, I don't even know where you got this analogy, the story that came with this, but when you're creating your vision, if you were to, it needs to be so clear and so precise that if you were to walk outside on the street and get hit by a car and die, that somebody would be able to pick it up right where you left off. And so first is vision, the second is goals. And so I went into a little process of how I like to design my goals. And so what I usually do, and I sit down probably about every 6 months to kind of write out and see where I'm at and figure out what else I need to do. But I'll start with a big overarching goal. Might seem a little lofty, but it's usually pretty realistic. So for example, I guess last year or maybe the year before, I wanted to get my SCS cert. And so overarching goal is to get your SCS cert. And then you make little branches, or you make a list of what hurdles you need to overcome to get to that goal. And they can be actual hurdles, or they could be mental hurdles. So actual hurdles where I didn't have the clinical experience. So I think all of the specialty certs, you need 2,000 contact hours with that population.
Yeah.
For sports specifically, you need 100 hours of venue coverage, and at least 50 of those have to be with a contact sport, full contact. So I feel like when it comes to becoming a sports specialist, that's kind of where people falter. They're like, where the heck do I get full contact hours? Because, and that, I think that was an additional requirement that they added in pretty recently, maybe within the past 2 or 3 cycles.
It started in my cycle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so those are some physical hurdles, but some mental hurdles were that I would get really anxious under stress, or if I had to be performing at a high level, whether that's in athletics or just, like test taking. So branching off of those obstacles, you come up with your small actionable steps that you can take towards those obstacles. So for me, it was obviously just getting reps in was the biggest one. So we had connections to a couple teams. Our full contact sport was rugby, which was really fun to cover.
Full contact.
Oh yeah,
One of my favorite sports.
It's very fun to watch. Really fun to cover. The team that we've been with now, they're the Gotham Knights Rugby Football Club. They've been amazing, and
sideline coverage is a nightmare.
I could have.
If you
There's
ever
a lot going on.
Rugby, yeah, there's a lot going on. You're basically just hoping somebody's not dead at the end of the tackle. And then when they get up, because they usually get out of the ruck and they take 20 seconds to get up. Sometimes you're like, oh, get up. Okay. Right. It's really mentally draining. It's one of the funnest sports ever. It's
really
hard
fun
to cover.
sport, extremely mentally draining. You have to be on for the full 80 minutes because if you miss one little thing, then that's it. Like you're racing out onto the field. And what's also actually really cool, it's one of the only sports that physios can just run out onto the field at any time. So
it's like a war zone.
Yeah,
there's like a play or a ruck going on, and you run out onto the field.
It'll continue to play.
And they'll continue to
play. Obviously, if the ref sees that the play is coming close, they'll stop play. But there's been plenty of times where there's been a head injury on the field, or somebody's lying on the field, and have to run out. So Rena and I usually are running double coverage, and so if there's one injury, sometimes there's usually a second, and so both of us are sprinting out onto the field at the same time to 2 separate things, and talking about performing under anxiety. It's I remember, what was that? The game against Greenwich. There was 2 separate, from one tackle, there was some new kid on this other team that ran in headfirst into a tackle, which is obviously a no-go, right?
Yeah.
And so he ran headfirst into a tackle, headbutted one of our players, and then both of them went to ground. One of them looked unconscious. The other one, this is like an SCS test question, by the way. So if you're applying for the SCS,
one is unconscious and one is alert.
Unconscious, one is alert. But your player is alert, but the other player is unconscious. Who do you respond to?
Right.
And so you're
and the player on your team who is alert is severely bleeding.
Yeah. So that's exactly what happened. We run. Rena and I are both running out onto the field. I run over to the player on the other team who looks like he's unconscious. He's face down. The other player on our team is up and he's bleeding everywhere. And they're like, "No, he's bleeding everywhere." And I'm like, "He's on the floor face down. I need to make sure
he might be dead.
He might be dead." Yeah. And so I was like, "Oh, geez." Running down onto the field and being able to perform under duress. For me, Rena, I don't know. I think I'm usually always at low key whenever it gets super hot. So it's so funny because people get so irritated when I respond to situations because they're like, "Is he okay?" I'm like, "Relax, give him a minute. He needs to breathe." And in my head, I'm like, "Oh my God, is this person going to die?" But having that, I think I'm lucky enough to have that really steely resolve to be okay, you're gonna be okay. If it's a neck injury or head injury, okay, can you feel everything? What's going on? Take your time. Everybody's like, "Can we get them off the field?" I'm like, "No, everybody chill the fuck out. Let me do my
not
fucking
touch
job."
them. So yeah, biggest thing for me definitely was just getting in reps, and that's with most things, the more practice you put in, the more you put yourself in those stressful situations, the less stressful they become. So that was again very big mental hurdle for me. And then the third. So we had vision, we had goals, and then the third pillar
Values.
was values. So really getting into the nitty gritty of your why,
Mm-hmm.
why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of common themes that showed themselves when Erwin and I were going through what we value was again that integrity, transparency, holding people accountable. So not just us, but also the people we are responsible for, and being able to. What kind of ties in with that is being able to have those difficult conversations with yourself and with a potential client who maybe is not doing what they need to be doing, and having that conversation with them and being okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm definitely one to avoid confrontation. So it definitely took a lot for me, and I've been working with a business coach for a few months now to really get through why I have these fears and reservations about either putting myself out there or acting as an authority or things like that. And when you become a business owner, or even if you're just working on professional development, and when you are in a service kind of career that we're in, and you're going to have people who disagree with you, you're going to have people that don't believe what you're saying, or they flat out tell you that you're wrong and what they know is right, and you're like, listen, I can't help you then. If you're not willing to learn and you're not willing to listen to me, then there's nothing I can really do to help you. I'll maybe refer you to a practitioner who might fit your needs better.
Right.
And so a lot of those things came up a lot with us. And also, I would say one of the really big ones was, and Erwin alluded to it earlier, but was valuing your time. And so we've worked a lot on establishing boundaries, both with our time and with our personal and professional lives, because we do spend a lot of time together. So
Everybody's wondering if we're dating. Yes, we're dating.
Yeah.
We've been dating since PT school.
so actually, as of January 5th or 6th this year, we opened up a home base on the Upper East Side inside of Concrete Jungle Grit Strength and Conditioning with Sean.
Nice.
Sean's the man. So what was really awesome about that, other than the obvious fact that, yes, finally we have a space and I don't have to travel around as much with a heavy backpack anymore and look like I'm hiking. But
There's nothing wrong with rucking.
true, very true.
All day, every day.
So what was really awesome was that we were able to draw broader boundaries in what we did at home versus what we did at work, because we found that all of a sudden all we talk about is work. On the weekends, we're driving to game coverage and we're talking about work again. We go home after a long work day and it's like, oh, how is this patient? How is that patient?
This client, that client. What should we do about this plan? Like, what are we going to do about this week's social media stuff? We should tweak this about the website, and not drawing those boundaries just sucked in our relationship. Not that it wasn't in a bad place, but we weren't able to shut off. Yeah. And so being able to set those boundaries, ironically enough, was almost liberating, even though it's constraining. So knowing that, okay, we have a business meeting at 10 a.m. on Wednesday. If you have to talk to me about something, you can write it to me on Slack, or we can talk about it on Wednesday.
Right. So now there are times where we'll be at home and I'll catch myself almost talking about a work-related thing, and he looks at me and I say, I'm just going to table that for the meeting on Wednesday. So then we can sit and have dinner and hang out with our dog, and it's great. And
not talk.
Sometimes we've talked so much that we just end up not talking it, but it's great because we're actually spending quality time together. Yeah. Instead of just work time. So.
No, we found the same thing. We have a practice together, my fiance and I, and same thing. We kept talking about our business all the time, even when we're alone, and so we kind of approached it a similar way, where we had set times where we would talk about it, and sometimes we'll just always wait till we're in the actual space that we do treatment in to discuss, and luckily we do have time to do that. But what I find interesting is these classes and these presentations are happening in school now. When we graduated in 2010, business of PT was all right, the most optimal way to have a business is see 2.5 patients an hour
Mhm.
up to 3, da 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 da. And I mean, the option of at a network never was discussed. The option
Never.
of cash was never discussed. So this is fascinating to me. It's like, do you guys find that there's more exposure now for new grads to business practices like yourselves, and some shift in the mind of students? They're open to it. Do you guys find there's a lot of people coming up to you, asking more questions, being really interested in finding out what they can do to open up their own practice and or join a practice like that?
Social media has definitely opened a lot of doors
Mhm.
in that respect. I would
Almost
say
to a fault.
almost to a fault for sure. I would say a lot of students kind of get to their third year and they see Shantae, they see the prehab guys, they see some of these bigger names in the cash-based world, and they think it's going to be easy.
Right.
And-
Well, that's
And social media makes it look really easy. And social media people post the highlights and never post the
Yeah.
the
The
low lights.
The
point.
low lights.
trenches. Yeah.
But-
Yeah.
That was one
Um,
of my. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No worries. So we do have that discussion,
Mhm.
and we tell them, like, listen, it's taken us 6 years to get to this point, and we started doing the research before I guess we started before you graduated, because
Little
I had
bit.
been involved with CrossFit for a bit.
right.
But I do think, however, that the way those classes are taught, like, we were brought in for an elective, but the actual business classes that are still taught
Mm-hmm.
are still kind of in that same way.
The mindset.
Every now and then they'll bring in guest speakers. So last year for NYU's business practices class, we gave a similar.
lectures.
We gave
two
two lectures.
lectures.
So one was about branding and marketing. The other was was building your website, and going through some of the material that the professor sent us, just to get an idea of what they had learned
Hi,
already.
Dr. Weaver.
Dr. Weaver, you're the best. It hasn't changed too much, and to me, speaking to other students in other programs, it seems like it's still it's not presented as a good option.
Mm-hmm.
No,
You
it's
know,
a risky.
It's
I mean,
risky.
It's a risky thing, but it's like risk reward.
Always.
But I think we were taught there's almost going back 10 years. A lot of our greatest, some great professors were, the typical route was to go to a hospital,
Mhm.
and then we were advised by a couple of outpatient doctors. He told us,
Mm-hmm.
"You really want orthopedics? Just go right,
Just go in it.
just go in
Chase
it."
it.
And
Yep.
but it's crazy how that perception. I mean, we've been approached by many new grads, I think, throughout the years,
Yeah.
or even in the Phils, and the mindset of, like you just said, is it easy? I mean, it's a struggle.
Mhm.
There's the
It's definitely not easy.
it's not. But on the flip side of it, the flexibility to choose, create whatever you want to create,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and set the value system that you believe in, as opposed to quietly hating your employer, or maybe not so quietly hating your employer.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's
you're
great that. And what are some of those challenges? I think that was one of my questions.
What are the challenges?
Some challenges in starting your own practice. Some of the challenges that you guys initially may have faced. I mean, you mentioned a couple.
Yeah.
Just kind of, I don't want to say cold calling, but pitching yourself was.
Learning to pitch was huge. Actually, this is also in line with a lot of the stuff. So we got invited to speak at the NYPTA Special Student Interest Group, and we spoke on a panel about small business. And a lot of those big things. Like one of the first hurdles actually was overcoming fear, because it's terrifying, and people are like, oh well, how do I know when I'm ready to start my own business? And the answer is never clear, right? It's always it depends. And so you said it before, in the sense of it's really focused on how risk averse you are. And so when I really sat down and I had my my weekly, almost semi-daily self-talk, I was like, all right, well, when did we finish? How old was I? Like 25, 26. So I finished school like 25, 26. This is my goal. I want to be either I want to be an admin, or I want to be running somebody's practice. And when we had started like hashing out everything from starting that side hustle, starting with pitching to gyms, I ended up having to ask the question like, okay, well, what is like what's the fear? Why am I afraid? And I was like, okay, well, I have 6 figures of student debt. Okay, one. Is that going to go anywhere immediately? Probably not, unless I hit the lotto or unless this practice like blows up huge. And so my risk adversity is, for me, I was like, well, what am I afraid of? And Gary Vee puts it, he had this one post that kind of just like literally swung the pendulum in the other direction, where the long or the short was, he's like, you could die tomorrow. And I was like, shit, if I die tomorrow, like, what do I die with? 6 figures of debt in my name, and I finished PT school, and Erwin's kind of a nice guy, so like, cool, all right. But then like, and having that like that onward thought is like, okay, well, what do I want to do with that? Like, and then trying to harness that fear and just be like, all right, well, what's the worst that happens? And overcoming that fear was like, all right, well, if we start this practice and it tanks, what's the worst that happens? We go back to working full time and
Same
like
place.
recoup, right? And then we start Match Fit 2.0. So a lot of it is fear and just like getting that first step in. And we talked about the students at NYU and at Columbia with it, and at the special interest group, like just start researching and start figuring out what your goals and your vision and your passion is. Because like, if you really enjoy it, like it's not really, you don't really think twice about it. You might end up like staying up till 2 a.m. like trying to research your market, figure out how it might feasibly work. Because there's so much in social media. There's so many things that are really propping up to help small businesses, whether or not it's like venture capital, like, or even your support network and your other colleagues that are like us, like people in our networks that are willing to support each other and provide any sort of info that we can to help each other succeed. Because our whole long-term vision is reframing and restructuring the healthcare and fitness industry, and it's not going to change. It's not going to change quickly unless insurance magically disappears and if these big companies decide to like change the way their models work, but that's not going to happen. So the best way to do it is, and I've had discussions with people about how cash PT is not going to solve the problem, but I agree, but it's going to start changing people's minds eventually. So
Very cool.
fear is one. What I can.
I mean, a lot of the hurdles that we had to overcome were based in fear.
Yep.
So, with the crash course in pitching, it's kind of that fear of rejection. Like, what if this person says no? Okay, well, 10 people said no. We finally got 2 people to say yes. So great, great, we got it.
Yeah.
Every time you have a potential client, you're selling, and selling has this negative connotation that everyone's like, oh, selling is sleazy. I don't want to be that person. That's just not me. I'm just not good at sales. But if you reframe sales as educating and empowering the person in front of you to make their own decision,
Right.
that's all sales is.
Right.
And if they want to work with you, great. If they don't, that's fine too.
Because at the end of the day, you're not putting a gun to the person's head and telling them to buy your service, right?
It's a choice.
Because it's a choice, and and it sucks, right? Because like when we started working out of, did you ever go to the Concrete Jungle when it was and they were on 94th?
I have never been there. I ran into Sean in the street somewhere. I mean, the way I know Sean is he used to work at New York Sports Club as a gym membership guy, and I was a trainer.
I can totally see him doing
And
Yeah.
he was a good.
He's a good salesman.
He's a great salesman. I mean, he would come and I would be training someone, and he'd like see me, and he'd tell, he was like, this guy is a trainer, and he trained Puff Dad. He told somebody I trained Puff Daddy, and that was our little joke. But again, he was always into work. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a quick transition. I think it was in track.
Yeah,
Mhm.
he ran track in Auburn.
athlete. Yep.
Well, great guy, Sean. I'm glad to hear you're doing well. He's got a great.
Killing it.
Yeah.
You two definitely have to stop by.
Yeah,
the
I wanna
space.
see
That's
it.
very cool, man.
Yeah, like reaching him, and we started. So they had this like, I don't know how big it was. It was a pretty big space on 94th Street, and there was no private room. So there was like a shoe room on the other side, and I was like, hell no, I'm not setting up my table in there. And so we started from the bottom. We charged $90 for an hour, cash, and it was the way that we got around direct access laws, new grads pay attention. I made people go to their doctors and get a referral.
Nice.
So I was like, go get a referral, then you can come to me.
Smart.
And it was good. It almost worked in our favor initially because those people were willing to go that extra step, right? So, the price point at that point was great, right? Because I was like, oh, $90, like it's less than a massage, and I was seething inside when people would say that. Nothing against LMTs, but so and then it took time and a process. So it was like, oh great, we have beer money, or like we have going out money, and now we have grocery
Not that
money.
we drink much beer
Not
anymore.
that we drink that much anymore. But, and so 90 turned into 120, turned into 150, turned into 200, 250, 300.
Nice.
So like our ability and our confidence to be able to say and fail repeatedly, and like be comfortable with having people say like, oh, that's too much for me, and be like, okay, well, we're probably not the best fit for you. So if you're looking for something, like, here's a list of my colleagues, like I'd rather you go see them, and that's fine. Because again, like we end up having people like critically appraise like what they think they're getting out of things, and most people are like, oh, you offer a great service, but I'm not going to pay you. I'm like, okay, well then what's the issue here? So they're like, oh, well, it's a lot of money. I'm like, well, if you value your health, like I can help you get there.
Health is priceless.
So like that, and that's a great segue.
And people don't realize that until they don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So true.
It's not a choice. Then it becomes a necessity. Yep.
Yeah, and like that segue into building a really resilient mindset for us is huge, and it's always an ongoing process for me. And so like I talk about it a lot on my social media. Rena puts up with it all the time. Like I'm just really hard on myself, and so like Rena would be like rubbing my back. Like I would take a call on speaker, be like, oh, and we spent a whole process like putting together our user experience. So like what that looks like from first contact to like an eval call to getting them into the office.
Right.
So our strengths were initially like talking to people on the phone, or even like seeing them in person, and then having that like energy to give them, and they're like, oh great, I believe in what you do, like I want to come in. And there were plenty of calls where Rena would sit on speaker and just like listen to the process, and people would be like, oh well, let me check my insurance. Like, I don't know if I can pay for this. And like, there were times where we hadn't learned about it at that point, but it was just like, all right, well, I don't know what the hell to say. Like, okay, well, okay, bye. And so now it's, being comfortable and like owning our shit, and being able to say like, listen, if you really want to get better, like I can give you the tools, but if you're not ready, like we're here if you're ready. Like this is my direct number, blah, blah, blah. Like, so like putting together like a script, and like being able to remind yourself and like get yourself into the zone, because like if you don't have a resilient mindset, and being able to come into the market as a business owner with an abundance mindset is huge.
Yes, thank you for that word.
Yeah.
As opposed to a scarcity mindset.
There's so
There's
many
so
of that.
much
There's so much of
scarcity
that
here.
shit here in New York City.
It's
And
the same.
there's so many people that are afraid of not getting a piece of the pie, and like
There's so much of it. It's just infinite, really.
Yeah,
We're really
really
lucky.
is.
you're not going to see everybody in New York City
No.
over your work week.
no.
And and if you tap into a certain group of people, then they don't usually go outside of that. You'll be able to kind of see the same group over and over again. But we have had these conversations over and over. But I think if there's more people too, if they understand that, especially as new grads, and they want to get into it, and they want to get to the point where you guys are and have a business, and they see that, then that's one less thing that they have to think about. Like, they're going to have people they can treat and work with. And the more people like yourselves who are out there, I think the less will be towards the mindset of insurance and things like that. I know
Yeah.
it's like a whole nother conversation, but
Totally.
Yeah.
it's a huge thing.
But having, you hit it around the head, fear and having resilient mindset, because it's, having your own business is like, you're in the ocean, and sometimes you're going with the waves, you're going against it, you die, you're doing all kind of crazy things to stay afloat, but having a plan.
Yeah.
Having a plan.
Having that, well, yeah, and having that mental plan too, right? Being able to cope. And again, it comes back to mindset, because like you have no idea how many people we've conversed with, other practitioners, other strength and condition coaches and trainers that were terrified to have a physical therapist in their space. They were terrified to know that we were also strength and conditioning coaches, and were worried that their clients would want to work with us. If we, if we worked on their, if we helped their clients return to performance.
Wild.
And so, if you're watching this and if you're listening, like, that's probably the first thing. Like, if you're really worried about making money, like, don't fucking do it.
Yeah.
Stay the fuck away stay away from owning a business. Especially in our industry, we should, our first goal should be making sure that the client gets the maximum value. And then only then, like, if you don't lose the sight of that, then
the money will follow. I mean, it sounds kind of a cliche thing, but if you do focus on what you do, the money it'll follow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, I think it does take a bit of mindset and planning, because I think a lot of maybe you guys could relate to this, but a lot of people that get into physical therapy do have somewhat of a helping mindset.
Yeah.
And they think it's like a taboo thing to even talk about money, to even discuss funds, or hey, this is what now it's time to collect money. It's kind of weird now. Don't pay me.
Yeah.
The
money mindset is huge, and Erwin and I actually both have financial coaches as well to kind of dispel our beliefs about money, because people, you can have a scarcity and abundance mindset about money too. Doesn't matter how much you actually have.
Correct. Yeah.
So,
Hi, Financial Gym.
Yes,
Yes.
Financial
I'm not getting
Gym.
paid for any of this, by the way.
Financial Gym is really cool, actually, because their plan is almost like if you were to join an actual gym or work with a
It's almost like working with a trainer.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
So
And they go with business stuff or personal, both?
They do both. We see them for our personal finances, but I think eventually I would like to ask them to help us with some business stuff as well. But their approach is very much like building healthy habits, changing your mindset about money.
It's not too far off from what we do, and like especially as healthcare professionals too, right? Because like, when you think about it, if you don't know, you have to find somebody that knows, right? So you're paying for a coach, or the analogy that we give to people that come to us is like, well, all right, you're in your kitchen and your sink explodes. Like, who do you call?
Correct.
Do you call like the IT guy? No, obviously not, right? You're calling a plumber, and
you're gonna pay the plumber whatever he asks for, because he just fixed your sink in 30 minutes.
Because he knows what's going on. So what's the difference between you coming to see me and paying me to help you put everything in order? And the same thing, that's the same way that the Financial Gym rolls too. And they Bridget, who's my financial coach, has been super helpful, and like having some of the same similar difficult conversations, like, all right, well, why are you spending money on this? And it's like, I don't know. She's like, well, why? And then like delving deep into, like, all right, well, did I really need that pair of shoes, or like, did I really need that sweatshirt, or whatever? So like, and it's very similar to what we do. So meeting the coach and like going back to hurdles and like being comfortable to ask for help. It was like one of our, and like kind of like I did have a big ego, like especially in PT school and like getting into starting the business. I was like, oh, well, I can figure it out. Like I can go on Google and like kind of talk to people, but it also worked in the best ways to like connect with other practitioners, and like so like Karen Litzy here in New York City, and like Chris Johnson, who used to work in New York City, and now he's out in Seattle, I think.
Yeah.
Like Chris Johnson was the first physio to be like, you should never charge less than $300 in New York City.
We know Chris.
And he was like, yeah, I usually charge for this stuff, but like, there you go. And I was like, sick. That's all I needed. Thank you.
That's good stuff. I mean, he's an organized dude, man.
Yeah,
Very smart.
very organized.
Super organized.
Yep.
We had a couple of seminars. He actually worked for a practice that we worked for a
New York
time.
Sports Med.
Yeah. So it was cool. It was cool.
That was through NISMAT, right?
It was after he
NISMAT.
was coming from NISMAT, and that's where he worked with Dr. Nichols.
Yes.
Did all those research articles and everything. But yeah, he was right before he worked with us, like, I don't know, maybe less than a year, and then he went to his own practice.
He would give seminars. He would give some seminars, running seminars, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, cool stuff. Good stuff he
Yeah.
puts out there.
Yeah,
But-
and Karen helped us a lot because I think she was probably the first person we knew of who did like a concierge model for physical therapy. So we asked a lot about that and how to determine our ideal clients, and that became a big thing because most PTs get into the profession because they want to help everybody, and they think that by defining a niche that they're
Shotgun
limiting
blasting.
that they're
Just like-
limiting themselves.
Birdshot everything.
Sniper shot's the best way to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, she helped us a lot in some of those beginning stages when we were really just trying to figure stuff out. Because I think at the beginning we were just like most people, we were like, yeah, we'll just treat whoever comes to us and whoever finds us. And she's like, nope, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, the target population.
So yeah, she helped us a lot in defining what match fit was going to be and figuring all of that out.
That actually leads to one of my questions.
Yeah.
I see on your website, definitely athletic population. Do you guys, what are the implications, I guess? Do you guys see any non-athletes in your practice? And if so, implications with treating those two different populations? Obviously, there's an athletic mindset that you guys deal with on a regular basis, but this, I guess, the non-athlete, if you want to label that a demographic, how do you guys approach that any differently than an athlete for the listeners that may not know what the difference is?
So we do treat non-athletes,
Right,
I guess we'll call them,
right.
general population
Right.
perhaps.
Mhm.
But really, anyone who's motivated will succeed in working with us. There are certainly some things that we may have to change about the way that we treat. So obviously with our athletes, they're looking to perform, so they kind of expect to do a lot of lifting and kettlebell work and stability work and moving towards sprints, being on the court. And with some of our general population clients, you kind of make it more functional, right? So I had this older woman in her mid-50s probably, who had 2 discectomies within a very short time of each other. By the time she saw me, she was already about a year out, and her doctor never lifted her precautions, so she had not
It's like a log rolling
bent,
everywhere.
lifted, or twisted
Oh my god.
in a year.
30 pounds.
Sorry.
This is 40 pounds.
No
I
jug of
can't lift
milk.
it. No
So-
jugs of milk.
No
Doug.
jugs of milk, and she lives on a 4th floor walk up. I was like, how do you do groceries? She goes, yeah, I do groceries. I'm like, okay, well, that's definitely more than 10 pounds that you're lifting.
Yeah.
And so you have to change the way you communicate with those people. And I know Erwin has some stories about some older clients that he's worked with, and he asks them to pick up a kettlebell off the floor, and they say, oh no, I can't do this. It's like a 10-pound kettlebell. They're like, oh no, I can't do that. And then he picks up their purse from the floor.
It's like 20
Also
pounds.
10
Right. Maybe 25.
Maybe 25, right? And they hold it on one shoulder. They're like, oh, this hurts and that hurts. Like, well, we got some things we might be able to work on here. But it's really, you just change the communication in that sense. But always, no matter who you're working with, making sure that you're relating it back to whatever they need to do. That's just universal.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
it is.
Super important.
so even if this person isn't trying to slang kettlebells around, it's like at least getting them to understand, like, we're doing this so that you can pick your groceries up, or we're making you get down and roll on the floor so you can play with your grandkids. So that's not groundbreaking. It's not new by any means, but I feel like that a lot of people, especially new grads, kind of get lost in the techniques and the
Same. Been
and-
there.
yeah.
we
And
all have.
we
Yeah,
all
we have.
we all did it. We
Definitely.
get lost
I'm
in
gonna
the
take the hell out of this
techniques and-
person.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
gonna
Let's check that
I'm
range
gonna
of motion.
Mackenzie over and over, and if it doesn't work, I'm gonna try some more Mackenzie
And
stuff.
I'm gonna SFMA everything, and
Right.
so
It's crazy.
yeah. I mean, if there's probably one thing that I would say to a new grad who's probably maybe freaking out about like, oh God, how do I treat these patients? Just this is another Dr. Weaverism, but if you treat everybody with safety and respect, you'll be fine.
Mm.
And then just my little spin on that as well is just making sure that you're doing it for them. You're not doing it for yourself.
Right.
So keeping their goals in mind and making sure that it's not what you want them to be able to do. It's something that they want to be able to do.
Absolutely. Now, you guys, not only do you work with a lot of athletes, CrossFit athletes, Olympic lifters, powerlifters, things like that, but you also travel with teams, or you're with multiple teams. You mentioned rugby and also soccer, or
Ultimate Frisbee.
Ultimate Frisbee, okay.
Yeah, we do sideline coverage for the Gotham Knights, so they're a D3 rugby club, 2018 D3 champions.
Oh, congrats. That's awesome.
And yeah, the first round of the playoffs is first week of March.
I think that
something like that. And then we work with a pro Ultimate Frisbee team.
Oh, wow.
The New York Empire. So we are the sports performance directors for them. So we run everything from their sideline coverage. So we're their first responders there. We run their strength and conditioning, and we run their rehab.
Wow.
So
cool.
we've set we've managed to finish negotiating our contract. So we can manage that whole return to performance from initial injury on the field, no matter if it's at practice or if it's in a game. We know exactly what's going on. We've documented it in our internal system, and then they come directly to us, and we're managing their rehab and their performance.
That's great.
Like as far as we know, there's not a lot of people that are doing it in the AUDL or even in like Ultimate Frisbee.
Right.
So we're what's funny is like talking with the management when trying to renegotiate our contract. They're like, "Oh, do you have numbers? Like, are there things?" And like, the league is only like 8 years old. All of our numbers in terms of reduction, like injury risk reduction, is like from soccer, is from rugby, is from similar sports.
Right.
But like, if you want to look at the early level reach, like this is it. Like we're collecting numbers now.
Yeah.
Like this, we're building this now
For Ultimate Frisbee.
for Ultimate Frisbee.
Wow.
There's like 6. They cut the season down to 12 games, so we're traveling for like 5 or 6 games. So the Eastern Conference is New York, Philly, DC, Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, and then we have one out of conference game where we're going to Raleigh. We're going to North Carolina.
Very cool.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. Like, yeah, Rena is the primary physio for Gotham.
Okay.
I'm the primary sports director for the Empire. So like we'll usually help each other if our schedules don't conflict, and if we're traveling, if there's a traveling situation. Gotham usually stays in the tri-state area, so we travel together usually. If the Empire's playing away, I travel with the Empire. Again, like, that whole AT thing is like, it's super glamorous. Everybody like DMs me like, "Oh, you're traveling all the time." Like, yo, it's hard. Like, I'm on a, and this isn't like the NBA or the MLB where we get flown everywhere. Like, I'm on a coach bus to Toronto, which is like, and those Canada trips are usually back to back. So it's like 8 hours to Toronto. Then we get like for like a midday game or like maybe an evening game. And then we get on the bus and drive halfway to like Ottawa or Montreal. Last year we had a Toronto-Montreal layover, and we stayed outside of Ottawa to drive on to Montreal for a midday Sunday game, and then drove back. That was a nightmare. It was the worst.
It's a lot. How do you guys manage that? I mean, I got
It's fun,
one
though.
of you guys. One of you guys are pretty much always in home base, but that must be a challenge though when one of you guys is traveling to treat patients here, but you guys have 2 of you, so
Yeah, we have 2 of us. Yeah, which is nice, and like we just took on a contract with the Brooklyn Nets.
Oh, it's huge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that.
The Mets. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, so we run the rehab with their G League team, and we work with the two-way players that run between the senior team. They call it the senior team between Brooklyn and Long Island, and the rookies out of Long Island. And so we either are covering their practices. We help the strength and conditioning coach, and the ATC who oversees most of the rehab, which is very interesting. Obviously, given like the state of sports in the United States, like ATCs usually rule the roost. But it's fine. Like she's awesome to collaborate with, and she's always asking for our opinions and like trying to take everything into account, which is great.
And she's generally just a very good clinician as
Mm.
well. So we feel like we're always on the same page. We're speaking the same language, and it's never. I've heard of other physios in a setting where there was a whole territory thing with the ATC and the PT, but I never feel that way.
Oh, that's
when,
great.
when we're working with
The
Nets.
culture in their organization is awesome,
Mhm.
and we like cannot have anything better to say about working in the system
Mm.
because everybody has like this amazing. There's just this amazing culture, and everybody is focused on open communication about players and making sure that everybody's on the same page. So it's good practice for sure.
And
That's
in
awesome.
and in relationship to just the health of the players, they're really focused on player longevity. So
Oh yeah.
it's not just, oh, let's get this person to be able to play in the game. It's no, let's make them healthy so that even if they don't get to stay with us, whatever team they end up going on to, they'll have a healthy player,
Yeah.
which is unheard of in professional sports.
Wow, they
It's
treat them like
Absolutely.
kind of assets. You know, that they're like a machine. You know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, especially like having been a little bit of a part of it, and you know, seeing the interesting side of the back end, and how some teams treat their players, and yeah, they're basically like assets.
Mhm.
And especially in the G League, there's a lot of turnover between players, like between teams. Like players will be there for 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and then they're gone. They get traded
Wow.
to another team.
That
Um,
quick.
Which is
Mhm.
yeah,
That's
it's
nuts.
super quick. I don't know. I'm not sure what the structuring is like for the G League players, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's kind of crazy because like you know you get to build a relationship with one of the players, and like you're helping them through their rehab process, and they're like, oh well, I signed a contract with so and so, so see you
Wow.
around.
And
And be like, all right, well, good luck.
And it even happens while they're on the road. Like
Yeah.
we'll get reports, and it's like, oh, this person just joined from blah blah blah, and I'm like, but you're in Utah right now. Like
They flew him over from Toronto. Yeah, so it's
Wow.
like it's pretty crazy. Yeah.
That's
You know,
nuts.
that's a whole other world. It is like
That
a
is.
It's a whole other subculture that I've never been exposed to. It sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's different. It's fun. It's challenging, and like also our ability to be able to. It keeps it fresh for us. So like working with ultimate frisbee players with like specific energy demands, energy system demands, and even like body types. Like
Yeah.
going from them to rugby. Like you have these massive forwards that are just like basically 2 to 3 times my size, and then you have basketball players that are basically just like stretched out like string beans. Like was like Stretch Armstrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's fun, and it keeps us out of the clinic.
Yes.
And like what we've found too is like being able to just not stay in the same place and like not deal with the same conversations. Although sometimes it comes back to having the same conversations, especially when it comes to like, you know, adherence and like doing what you need to do, and like actually, you know, like you need to take care of yourself, whether or not
Right.
it's a professional basketball player
Mhm.
or it's a professional, like it's technically semi-pro, but they call it professional, but professional frisbee player, or even like, you know, somebody who plays Zog Sports here in New York City. So yeah, we do see a ton of athletes, and it's good to keep it fresh. But like I don't know if you were going to mention this, but with our branding and our marketing, we had our first person that was referred to us, took a look at our website. We scheduled a phone call, and they were like, I really would love to work with you, but I don't think I'm the elite athlete that you want to work with. And so Rena was like, your marketing hit it. And I was like, I feel bad. Like it's not supposed to be like super, like, I don't know. Our marketing and our branding is supposed to borderline on like very exclusive, but the goal is to hit the people that really want it. And
Right.
so like, yeah, it kind of it mentally priced this person out, because they're like, oh, I don't know if I want it. So we like had to set up a follow-up phone call and be like, hey, like, you know, this is what our branding is, but we work with people that really want it. And they like, I don't think they ended up working with us anyways.
Mhm.
They decided to go to like they decided to go to a bigger practice, which is fine. But a lot of that helps us sets expectations. Like,
Quick, without even seeing them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is great.
So like it avoids a lot of that. Setting the expectations up front with our branding kind of eliminates a lot of the chaff. especially when you have these like, and I'm sure you've experienced it with like the same crap conversations where you have to convince people to do things, or people are not motivated to do things. So like it's helped us in leaps and bounds by like starting to attract and find the right clients. And and our whole thing is like, if you're all in, we're all in.
Mm-hmm. That's
And
super important.
And if you're not ready, then we're here when you are. Or if you don't think you'll ever be ready, that's okay too. And that's when we start referring out, or even just giving them other options. And sometimes that, I feel like that surprises people.
Yes.
And we've gotten feedback from that before. Like people who may not have ended up working with us, but they appreciated that we were willing to refer out or give them other avenues that they could go down. And it was just, it's been interesting with some of those people, because they're surprised. It's like, you shouldn't be surprised by somebody trying to do good by you, So
it's a crazy conversation. Like, I run into a similar scenario if someone doesn't want to pay X dollars, and I'll give them a list, and they're like, "Wow, it's really helpful. Thank you." And I'm like, "Well, that's really what I want to do, is help you, but
don't mention it.
Yeah, right.
Pay it forward.
Yeah, pay.
Just pay for it.
That's right.
Because it sucks like that's the norm. That people don't expect to get served, like to be helped. And we've had that come around and help us in so many ways. Like I remember referring somebody, it was a young woman that had torn her ACL playing soccer. And she was like, "I really love your product. Like, I really love what you offer, but I can't afford it." I was like, "Okay, well, where do you work? Where do you spend most of your time?" She's like, "Oh, I'm in." I referred her to Spear around 16th Street, and literally, we had this conversation at like a 2 p.m. on a Saturday, and then I got a call at 5 p.m. that same day, and she's like, "Actually, I'd rather see you."
Yeah.
She's like, "I looked at their website and I was not interested." And I was like, "Well, that's great. So let's get going." So yeah, like doing the right thing, like not even just as just like being a good person. Like
simple
it
stuff.
just goes a long way, and we. It's super cliche and it's super simple, but we forget about those things sometimes. And again, like when it comes down to it, if you're focused on making the dollar, like, you're going to miss those opportunities. And best case scenario is like you refer somebody on and they're like, "Oh, I had a conversation with Rena, Erwin, or Lee, and Eric." Yes. Sorry, I blanked out for a second. This cold brew's hitting me really hard. And they took the time to refer me to somebody that would help me. So, doing the right thing, and like we don't get a lot back. Like our profession is super thankless.
That's true.
And most of us don't come into it for the kudos. We just do it because we love to see people succeed, and we need to take ownership of that. And when it comes back, that's great, but making sure that we do what we aim to do in the first place is so important. It's really important.
This is like the model mission.
It is. This is so key. I mean, one of the main things. You guys already hit it on the head today, but we've already
a dead horse.
Let's
keep kicking him.
That's right. Don't stop. He's already. we want like the new grad. We want a new grad to listen to this and be like, all right, well, there's other options out there. I want to work with athletes. I want to work one-on-one in musculoskeletal care. Then what can I do to optimize that? And this is one avenue, and it's possible. It wasn't like a straight line, but it was also something that was thought out. It was planned. It was through experience, and now it's starting to come to fruition. So I think that's a hopeful thing, and I think it's gonna help everybody if there's more people like this. So
it's inspiring to hear you guys on how clear your values are, and again, as clear as it is, you don't paint the rosy picture of how you got there, and the leaps and bounds. But at the end of the day, you said it, resilience. Having the resiliency, and to look deep. It's scary conversations you have to have with yourself pretty regularly. It's not a one convo.
No,
it's
definitely not.
You got to keep revisiting it, and you guys kind of clearly, you're sharing a lot in terms of your your daily practice in terms of what it kind of takes, because it does. It's the benefit of working in a, well, it's not even a benefit, but the drawback that a lot of people have at going to a 9 to 5 kind of gig is they could turn off.
It's safe.
Yeah, it's safe.
Very safe.
Your brain
It's
likes to be
safe.
safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It does, but then you still get eaten.
Yeah.
It's safe,
But, like,
yeah, you still get
But not everybody's gonna want to do the hustle,
right.
And like, not everybody needs to go out and start their own business, because and that's fine. Like,
Right.
I think there's always gonna be that market for that in network, like, because there are people that can't afford PT,
Right.
which is
Absolutely.
fine. Like, that's great. But like, having the right clinicians in those spots to develop that culture is huge. And the clinicians that are outside of that can also help to change the culture.
Absolutely. I think you just said it. I mean, there's a lot of the patients, bless you, a lot of patients that I would see in these busy clinics, I would say to myself, wow, when I'm giving 150% to that particular person, I'm like, they've never gotten this care, or some of my colleagues that were sitting alongside of me, I'm like, damn, they're getting so, and you could hear it, you could hear it from them, like, wow, this is a different experience.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to pass on, not what we've been through with kind of a mill practice, and
Right.
we don't want that to be the norm.
Mhm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to wrap it up, but I wanted to ask you guys, I guess, advice for people who might be listening to this and they might be in that mill network, or they're not even out of school yet, they're a student and they're looking to get in this. What's some kind of key points that you would, or bullet points, I should say, that you would give them?
Shameless self plug. We do run a coaching program.
Nice.
We're actually just starting to open up our 3rd cohort for an 8-week program, which runs through a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about. So you're going to get some of that for free right now, actually.
Right.
But
we sprinkled a lot of it throughout
Yeah, right.
throughout the talk.
there's a lot of it throughout the talk, and a lot of it throughout our talk at Columbia. So, some of those bullet points, like a lot of figuring out who you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it goes back to goals, setting a 5 to 10 year plan, and figuring out that vision and what those values are.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you want to be in 5 to 10 years? Like, do you want to be that person? Do you really see yourself in that position of running your own practice, being the admin? Because if you do, then what you do is you start making those steps towards it. And so, some of those action plans might be, okay, well, maybe I need to go put myself in, find a position at a practice where I can learn how to do those things. Maybe I join Erwin and Rena's coaching course.
Mm-hmm.
But like, or maybe I reach out to Lee, I reach out to Eric, I reach out to Zach Gabor, I reach out to Clinton Lee. Who else is here in New York City that's doing awesome stuff? Karen Litzy. And like, DM them and ask them where to start. And they end up circling around. Like, it took Chris Johnson like 3 weeks to answer my DM. I think it was on Twitter. But there's so many good people in the profession. You just need to find them and like find out who they are. Ask them, because all of us are willing to help. Like, every time somebody shoots me a DM, whether or not it's on Match for Fit Performance or on my personal Instagram, they're like, hey, where can I get started? Like, what can I do? I'm like, go read this book, or let's chat on Google Hangouts, and like, let's see what we can do to get you started and get you on that path. Because if that's what you want, like, yeah, hell yeah, I'll help you get it. Because it's like one of my personal and our practice initiative to help physios and students go on to change the profession and like maintain that integrity and transparency, and just being fucking awesome and not being a shitty clinician.
Yeah.
That's right.
So what else? Self-development.
Yeah, self-development. A lot of those, having really hard conversations with yourself, and that kind of goes into asking yourself who you want to be. It all ties in, I think, to just figuring out who you are. And you have to be willing to change and willing to learn. And if you're not willing to do that, then it might not be the right path for you. But at the same time, if you take the time to invest in yourself personally, Because everybody, you know, you get out of school, it's like, I want to take this course, that course, the other course. But people don't think about learning more about themselves. They think they have themselves all figured out.
Like non-clinical skills are huge. And, you know, I'm sure we've talked about it definitely, Lee, like being able to have the heavy discussions, learn how to pitch, be able to be okay with the things that you want, or be like acknowledge your limitations. 'Cause it takes a lot to acknowledge our limitations. Like it took me, you know, from PT school till literally maybe about 6 months ago to be okay with like constantly failing. I would beat myself up all the time. But like, and I remember it at the student interest group, they're like, what's the best advice you can give? I was like, fail a lot. And it sucks because mindset wise, like being in academia and in school, it's like, don't fail. Don't fail.
Of course, we've
And
always,
like my mindset has always been, all right, well, don't give the wrong answer. And if you don't know it, just shut the fuck up and don't say anything. But now it's, you know, I've started to get comfortable and be okay with being wrong and admitting that you're wrong, which is like hard for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
So like maintaining that humility and being like, and it comes back to mindset, like being okay with fucking up and being wrong, and because it's a learning experience. All of it is a learning experience. And Rena said it earlier, and Dr. Weaver said it millions of times, like if you're safe and respectful with your clients or the people that you interact with, and they don't leave you hurt or worse or dead, you didn't do any worse, and it's a learning experience. So, you know, and it's all timing. Like a lot of it has to do with timing. Like dose training loads, especially with like acute discomfort. You know, I fucked that stuff up a lot. Like, oh yeah, we loaded you way too soon. And like most people will be frustrated, and you're like, if you come back to them and you're honest and you're like, you know what, this was the load, and we brought this up too quickly. People are like, oh shit, you're right. Okay, all right, well, I'm willing to do that, as opposed to being like, oh, I don't know, maybe it's because you slept weird, or like maybe it's because like
it's your fault.
Yeah, it's your fault. It's usually our fault.
Absolutely.
Whenever our clients leave us worse off for wear. So yeah, humility is huge.
Absolutely.
Do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, bringing it back to mental resilience and taking a look at yourself in the mirror and a lot of deep diving. I feel like I've done a lot. So again, the business coach I've been working with, we had to explore a lot of things with me and why I felt certain ways about things. And it's the more comfortable you are with yourself and the way that you present yourself to the world, which is kind of also why I ended up leaving that first job, was because, again, it didn't align with my values, but also when a company doesn't align with your values and you have to go represent them somewhere, like it just doesn't feel good. And so being really comfortable with yourself and what you believe in, and trusting yourself to make the right choice that you know is right for you will help steer you in the right direction no matter where you go. So yeah, I guess to sum all that up, for a new grad or even a new practitioner who's just not happy where they are, just take that time to be with yourself. And it's hard with us because, you know, we're in a profession where we're interacting with people all the time, so it's hard to give yourself that time. But set those boundaries for yourself and really take time to do that, because it helps with so many things. With your personal relationships, but your relationships with your clients, with your coworkers, and with anybody else you come in contact with. So
super important.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Great advice. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
parting words?
I think this has been like fantastic. I mean, we would love to have you guys back for a part 2, just because there's so much stuff to talk about. Not only we didn't dive into like, you know, keeping fit and going through like, you know, new motor, like you just started competing in Olympic lifting. I think that's super important when you work with athletes, because like you're leading by example. And there's this huge thing where should we even be, you know, like being active and all this stuff. Anyways, but that's a whole nother
we
thing.
need to have you guys back on, because there's a lot of things
Oh, hell yeah.
There's a lot of things we wanted to touch. Yeah, we wanted to touch upon, but you guys, I mean, amazing to have you guys on. We really appreciate you
Thank
both.
you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And Stay tuned. Part
Yeah.
2.
Yes. Thank you guys. All
Bye.
right.